Hello and welcome to this webinar. If you're watching this, you must be a runner who's got an event coming up, whether that be a marathon, half marathon, or maybe you're just starting out in your running journey. I hope, whatever situation that you're in, that there is something in this webinar and in this presentation that's going to help enhance your running performance. First of all, in terms of introductions, my name's James. I'm a performance nutritionist and founder of Fuel the Runner. Fuel the Runner started through my own running journey. So a few years ago, I was fortunate to get a place in the London Marathon, and as I started to train, as I started to get further in terms of running distances and durations that I was doing for, equally as I started to join social media groups and things like that, I found that nutrition was an area that a majority of runners were overlooking. I found that runners were underfueling themselves, I found that runners were consuming the wrong foods at the wrong time, and ultimately they were paying the price in terms of it was limiting their running performance. So that led me to create Fuel the Runner. And Fuel the Runner is designed to be a nutrition support service that's open to runners of all levels and abilities, and it's designed to enhance their running performance using the power of food and nutrition. And this all comes through evidence-based nutrition support and advice. In terms of me, I am a keen runner. You can see here, this is me on the left, having done the London Landmarks half marathon a few years ago, and on the right, the London Marathon back in 2025. Recently, I've done 2 half marathons in 2 weeks, and I've got lots of events that I'll be running later on this year. And so if you're watching this, just to highlight, I suppose, the impact and importance of nutrition, maybe something to ask yourself: how often during your runs have you felt absolutely exhausted? So you may have planned, let's say, a 10-mile run, 15-mile run, maybe longer, and after maybe 3-4 miles, not a very long period of time at all, you felt absolutely exhausted. You're struggling to maintain your running performance. How often have you hit the wall? So you start running, you've done a couple of miles, and then you start to slow down. Maybe you start to walk through a bit. You start to run again, but then you hit the wall and you start walking again. How often has this occurred? Or maybe how recently has this occurred? How often do you struggle to recover from a run? So maybe after a long run, maybe even the days after, you're still struggling to walk. You're walking like a robot, you constantly feel tired and fatigued. A lot of the time, it's not so much your training that's the issue, it's your fueling that's an issue. And this is part of the reason why I've created or hosted this webinar and this presentation to help enhance your performance. So in terms of what I'll cover in this webinar, I'll start off talking about how to fuel effectively to support your running. I'll share some top nutrition tips to further enhance your running performance. I'll share some common nutrition mistakes. Excuse me. I'll share some common nutrition mistakes that runners often make on race day and how to avoid them. I'll share a little bit about how to optimize your race day fueling, and so much more. If you have any questions based on what I talk about, I'll share all my contact details, or feel free to comment below this video as well. So, in terms of why nutrition is important, like I say, for me over the years, I've often found that nutrition is often overlooked by a majority of individuals, whether that be around their health and well-being, whether it be around their sporting performance too. So I often say nutrition here is 1% of an athlete's development, but it's that 1% that has a huge impact on the other 99%. So just to highlight that in a bit more detail, your nutrition in terms of what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, it can have a huge impact on all aspects of your performance. Anything from how you perform during the race itself, it's going to impact your recovery, your sleep, your training adaptation. It's going to impact or help reduce your risk of things like injury and illness. It's going to help maintain your overall health and long-term health too, and so much more. And so learning how to optimize your nutrition strategy around training, around sort of other demands, so work demands, family demands, things like that, it is my purpose here with Fuel the Runner. And so some of these points I'm going to come on to talk more about. I'm not going to cover everything in loads of detail, but if you are looking for sort of further tips, support and advice, do check out my social media pages and website, where I do write blogs. I share lots of videos and content around lots of other nutrition-based topics too. So that's at Fuel the Runner. When it comes to fueling and things like that, the best way I can describe fueling, I like an analogy, and the one that I often use is the body, or fueling the body for exercise, is a bit like putting fuel in a Formula 1 car. So in the same way, they want to fuel their car effectively to get the most performance. This is what we're trying to do here. So, in sort of the equivalent to qualifying for Formula One, they need to put enough fuel in the car so the drivers can sort of set the fastest lap, but also have enough fuel to get them back to the pits. Obviously, on race day, they need to put more fuel in the car so they can perform. They can perform at the best, at the most, and then once they finish the race, again they've got the fuel to get them back to the garage there as well. And the same thing happens in the body. If we're not putting enough fuel in the body, this is where performance starts to suffer. So we start to see, if we're not consuming enough, we start to see an impact in terms of our recovery. So it's taking longer for us to recover before our next training session or competition. So that could be impacting our performance, stopping us getting a PB at that race. Maybe it's stopping us from progressing in our training. So you might be going out doing lots of runs and gym work and things like that, but you find that you're struggling to increase the weight that you're lifting, or struggling to hit that target pace that you're aiming for. What you often find is that lack of energy, or if there's not enough energy in the body, it starts to impact things like our immune system. So if there's not enough fuel in the tank, again, your immune system just goes out the window. So you're now more susceptible to coughs, colds, and other illnesses. And the same thing with injury as well. We do need an effective nutrition strategy to help minimise that risk of injury too. And this is something that a lot of runners overlook. At time of recording, I see a lot of runners that are currently training with a short period of time to go before London Marathon, where lots of runners are now sort of sharing, commenting about picking up injuries, struggling to recover from illness. And I'd say quite often it's not so much because of the training or other things, it's because of their nutrition. They don't have an effective nutrition strategy, and it's not supporting their recovery. It's not helping to manage these things. In addition, if you're not putting the fuel in your car, putting the fuel in your body, you're going to be tired. You're going to be constantly fatigued, exhausted, and things like that. So ultimately, this is going to reduce and impair your performance. So as I say, it's going to stop you reaching your full running potential. When it comes to nutrition, there's often this association of sort of good food versus bad food, whereas for me, I believe it's not so much this case of good food versus bad food. It's more the case of context and understanding what's the most appropriate food or drink in that given situation or scenario. So what you can see on the screen, the sports drinks, the sweets, the Jaffa cakes, the flavoured milk and so on, these aren't necessarily the best options to be having at home or having at work and things like that. However, these are very effective to be having around exercise. So the sweets and the sports drinks beforehand and during are a great source of carbohydrate to help maintain the energy levels, to help you run faster for longer. The flavoured milk is a great post-exercise recovery option. I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So rather than sort of looking at food versus good and bad, it's looking at what food or what drink is going to be most appropriate in that situation. When it comes to building an effective nutrition strategy, for me, this is where I use what is referred to as the 3 T's of nutrition. So the first one is the type. So the type is basically what we eat and drink, and this from experience is what most runners get right. So it's great when runners say to me they're eating their bowl of porridge before their runs, they're having their gels during their runs, and then they're having their milk after their runs, for example. And that's great. So understanding what food or what drink to have in that situation is certainly a good starting point. However, it's the other 2 T's that is often overlooked, and that's what's limiting the running performance. So the second T, therefore, is the total. So this refers to portion sizes. So essentially how much that runner is having in that given situation. And the trouble here is I often find that a majority of runners tend to overconsume. So their quantities, their total is too high at the wrong time and too low in certain situations. So most runners are under fueling their runs, for example, and then maybe over-consuming on their rest days. And this is what is impairing their running performance, but equally stopping them from achieving their health goals. Maybe it's impacting their body composition. So again, a good example, I was talking to a runner the other day, and they said to me that they were having those little sachets of porridge before their runs. Great option. However, when you actually look at the nutritional values, you've only got around 40-ish grams of carbohydrate with the if you add the milk there. And for some of these runners that are going out for long runs, it's just nowhere near enough. So you do need to be aware of the total, the quantity and the portions. In terms of timing, the timing is just as important. So, as well as what you eat, how much you eat and drink, it's also when you're having it in relation to the build up to exercise, but then throughout the exercise and afterwards too. So, if you finish a big training session or finish a run and you ignore your nutrition for a few hours, potentially that's a missed opportunity to support that recovery process. If you're consuming too much, too soon, too quickly before exercise, so you have a huge meal and then try and go for a run after, let's say, 20 minutes, half an hour, this is probably why you feel so sick, or this is why you start running and feel like you need to go to the toilet. So it's really important to take these three factors into consideration to help you start to build your nutrition strategy. So just as a brief overview in terms of how to fuel your runs effectively, fueling your runs really starts around 2 to 3 hours before the run itself. The reason for this is it allows the body the time to digest and process that meal, so we've got the energy available. Whereas if we left it any longer before exercise, by the time we start exercising, we're going to be really hungry. So that 2 to 3 hour window is really key there. In terms of quantities, what we're aiming here is around 4 to 1 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body mass, 4 to 1 hours before the event. So what I mean here is the longer you've got, so if this is the start of your race or start of your training session, this is the time available. We can have bigger portions, but as we get closer to the start of the training session or start of the run, we need to have less just to minimise that pressure or demand that's placed on the stomach. So 4 hours before your training run, aiming for around 4 grams of carbs per kilogram of body mass, and if you've only got an hour or so, around the 1 gram of carbohydrate. It is a good sort of guide there. So, for example, if you're a 80 kilogram runner, for demonstration purposes, 3-4 hours before, so what's that going to be? That's going to be 160, 240 grams of carbohydrate in your pre-run meal. Whereas if you've only got an hour or so, you're looking about 80 grams of carbs as a starting point. As you're probably aware, what we want here is to try and choose these high carbohydrate based meals and snacks. One thing to take into account though is we want to choose those that are low in the fat, low in the fibre, just because it takes the body longer to digest and break these options down. And potentially this is what is also going to increase that risk of runner's gut. Just to show you some example meals of what this looks like, so this is by no means a definitive list, but it's just a few examples to help you. So for me, my go-to is porridge. So a bowl of porridge with a handful of fruit. Again, it's up to you what you add. In this example, I've got some raspberries and blueberries. And if you're looking for additional top-ups, you can add things like honey, jam, other condiments just to provide some additional carbohydrate if you're trying to hit those higher targets there. If you're a runner that doesn't like porridge, you could use something like a bowl of Weetabix, so 2 or 3 Weetabix biscuits with the milk and your choice of toppings, or to be fair, you could use a bowl of cereal, so Rice Krispies, cornflakes, that sort of thing, could also be popular options or effective options. One thing I'd always say to you is practice your nutrition. Practice, trial different foods, meals, drinks to see what works best for you. The most effective nutrition strategy is the one that helps you. So what I mean there is focus on your strategy. If you've got a friend, a fellow runner that does something completely different, if that's what works for them, great, no problem. Other options, pasta dishes, really quick, easy, simple to make. Same thing here with the pasta dishes. I'd always try and choose those in a tomato or vegetable based sauce rather than those that are in a cheesy or creamy sauce, just because again the cheese and the cream is just going to take longer to break down and more likely to increase the risk of runner's gut, as I mentioned. Other options that are quite popular could be things like slices of toast with some peanut butter and a sliced banana, even things like jacket potatoes. So you've got a really good source of carbohydrate from the jacket potato, and you can add obviously different toppings depending on your preference there, from maybe additional protein to support that post-exercise recovery. So when it comes to fueling your runs effectively, always starting with an effective pre-run meal is certainly going to be important. Some additional top tips to help you here. For some of your longer runs or high intensity sessions, taking on additional high carbohydrate based snacks about an hour or so beforehand just provides some additional fuel. So again, in terms of what you have here, it's entirely up to you. But some popular options could be things like a bowl of yogurt with some berries. It could be some fruit, so whether that be a banana, it could be the dried fruit, so raisins, sultanas, that sort of thing. In terms of cereal bars, you don't have to have Rice Krispie Squares. Other brands are available. Again, it's very much what works for you. Sports drinks, whether you buy Lucozade Sport, whether you use the sort of powdered fuel options, so Tailwind, whether you use things like SIS Beta Fuel, again, if that's what works for you, great, no problem at all. In terms of smoothies are one of my favourite sort of go-to options just because they're really quick and easy to make. You can blend up some oats, a banana and some milk, and you've got a really simple pre-run sort of smoothie option there, and equally you can do the same to support your post-exercise recovery too. Again, this is by no means a definitive list. A lot of this is very much about finding what works for you. When it comes to fueling during your training runs and equally the race itself, guidelines at a minimum are at least 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. If you're a sort of very fast runner going for sort of sub 3.5, sub 3 at a marathon, maybe you're hitting sort of sub 90 half marathons, things like that, I'd be trying to go even sort of higher in terms of the carb intake, so closer to sort of 90 grams and potentially even beyond. There's some new research showing some benefits here. But even just to show you what this looks like, so it's great when you see, 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. However, in terms of what this looks like from a sort of nutrition point of view, 30 grams of carbohydrate, this is the equivalent to a bottle of Lucozade Sport, so 500 milliliter bottle of Lucozade Sport. 1 to maybe 2 energy gels, maybe beyond that, depending on how many grams of carbohydrate they contain. So something like the SIS gels that you can see on the screen, they have about 22 grams of carbs. That's going to be 1.5 those. But some gels might be a little bit lower. Equally, some gels will be a little bit higher. Some gels will have about the 40 grams of carbs in them, so you might need to adjust your strategy accordingly. Other options, things like fruit. So like I say, whilst running, you could sort of snack on a little bit of a banana whilst you run. Cereal bars, again, if that's what works for you. And of course, you can get the sort of powdered fuel option. So some powdered fuel will be available in a sort of tub that you mix in with your water bottle. Or some will be as a series of sort of sachets. So with those sachets, again, same thing, you can sort of take them with you and add it to your water bottle, mix it up, and you sort of consume it as a liquid form. Other popular options could also then be the sweets. So in terms of the sweets, it could then be things like the sort of jelly babies. It could be things like the jelly beans. That sort of thing could also be popular options here to further help as well. If you're trying to hit sort of higher amounts, so closer to the 60 grams of carbs, fairly straightforward. All I've done is multiply these options. So again, same thing, depending on what your chosen method of fueling is, you're essentially doubling the quantity. So if you're trying to get 60 grams of carbs, but you prefer using the SIS gels, that's essentially 3 an hour that you've then got to try and consume. So maybe 1 every 20 minutes or so. Essentially, a litre of Lucozade Sport, 2 cereal bars, maybe 2 large bananas, two scoops or 2 sachets of the powdered fuel might then be required to help you hit sufficient quantities. The other sort of important factor to take into account, particularly in the build up to some of your races, is then around your recovery. So what I tend to find is the recovery side of things is a golden opportunity that's often overlooked by so many runners for a number of reasons, but it's one that can make such a difference. It's your recovery nutrition that can help enhance your training adaptation so you become stronger, fitter, faster, as well as improving your recovery time so you can perform at your best in your subsequent sessions, your races, things like that too. When it comes to optimizing your recovery, there's what we often refer to as the 4 R's of recovery. So the 4 R's of recovery, the first R is about the importance of the refuel, so putting the fuel back into your body. So if you imagine the body is like the fuel tank in your car, so going back to our fuel tank analogy, at the end of your training session, particularly, or races, some of your bigger training sessions, long races, that fuel tank is going to be really in the red now. So it's really important that we get some carbohydrate back into the body as soon as possible. In terms of targets, we're looking for at least 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram body mass here as soon as possible. And I'll show you some examples of snacks and drinks that you could use in a moment. In terms of the rebuild, so this is about the importance of protein. So adding protein to your meals and snacks and will support that muscle growth and repair. So again, this is what's going to help you to recover much quicker. Same thing here, getting that protein into your body as quickly as possible is going to make a huge difference. The third R is then about the importance of rehydrating. So rehydrate is then all about adding suitable fluids to your body or back into the body too. So during exercise, you could be losing anything from maybe half a litre plus every hour during your training sessions. And if you're not replacing that fluid, you start to become very dehydrated, which is then going to impact not just your physical performance, but equally your psychological performance as well. So we do need to be drinking plenty of fluid once we finish our exercise too. The fourth part is not so much nutrition focused, but more around sleep and the importance of rest time. In the build up for, if you're at time of recording, there's less than 50 days to go to the London Marathon and other events. If this is something that applies to you, your rest or prioritizing your sleep as much as possible is going to be one of the best tips or best recommendations I can share with you, just because it will help you recover much quicker, but equally also help maintain a strong immune system and minimize that risk of you picking up any coughs, colds, or any other illnesses too. Just to show you what this then looks like in terms of potential options. So again, by no means a definitive list, but starting that recovery process as soon as possible with snacks and drinks would be a top priority for me. So I'd be making sure you've got a drinks bottle with you and having some fluid. In terms of simple snacks, it could be the fruit, it could be cereal bars, it could be pots of yogurt if you've got the ability to store them. It could be that you make up some wraps and bagels to further support your recovery. So what you can see on the screen, I've got some chicken salad wraps here. But again, you don't have to use that. You can use your choice of protein, other forms of carbohydrate too. Once you're then home, or once you've got access to more facilities, having some more substantial meals. So it could be the pasta dishes, could be the rice dishes with a source of protein. Or my personal go-to is things like stir fries. They're just quick, they're easy. Quite often I've usually got loads of vegetables and loads of random ingredients that need using up, so chuck them all in and you can cook a really simple, healthy, nutritious meal that's going to meet all of those R's of the recovery nutrition that we've talked about within a very short period of time. The other option, just to sort of touch on that you can see on the screen, the milk. So milk, in terms of its benefits, it basically hits all three of these 3 R's of recovery. So 1 is helping us to rehydrate, 2 is providing us with that really good source of carbohydrate, 3 is also helping us helping us by providing that source of protein to support that muscle growth and repair. Again, you don't have to use flavoured milk. A pint of semi-skim milk would have exactly the same effects. You don't have to use chocolate milk. You'd get the same effects from vanilla and strawberry milkshake as well. Again, so you don't. There's no chocolate milk is not necessarily essential. You could use the other options if you prefer. So a bit of a brief overview in terms of how to fuel and use nutrition to recover effectively. Some additional top tips just to help further enhance your running performance. The first one I'd say is, if you have got a race coming up, is to think about your nutrition provision that's going to be available to you. So when you start to look at your race, what is actually provided on the course? Some events will be very well catered for, supplied, as in they will have things like water stations, and they'll have them at regular intervals. So it might be every 3 miles, some might be every 5 miles, 6 miles, some might only have one water station around halfway. So all of a sudden you've now got to think about how you're going to sort of carry everything that you need and what nutrition you're going to need for that event. As well as the water stations, what about the carbohydrate station? So same thing, same thing here in terms of sort of the importance of carbohydrates. Some events that you go to, particularly more the marathons, they may provide some gels, they may provide other carbohydrate-based products to further support you. If so, what are they? What brands are they providing? I'd certainly recommend trying and practicing with that brand before the start of the race. So I'll show you an example of this in a moment. As well as the stations, how frequent are they? So like I say, are they going to be every few miles? Are they only going to be are they only ever going to be sort of every 5 miles or so? All of a sudden, and this is where you need to work out what your time is that you're going for. So for some runners, this might mean that they're only going to have take on some fluid maybe once an hour. It could be that some events that they're doing, they might be able to just about hit their sort of fluid requirements. As I say, it's all these factors you need to take into account to further help. The additional consideration is also the weather. So at time of recording, we're sort of mid-March. And it's very sort of, the better weather is starting to come, but it's been very cold, damp, dark, things like that. But when it comes to April, and so for some of the events in April, so London Marathon, Manchester Marathon, for example, the weather could do the complete opposite. A few years ago, I went to London Marathon to watch, and it was very cold and wet. In 2025, it was extremely hot, it was about 28 degrees. And the trouble with this is the weather can have a huge impact on your fueling and hydration. So when it's hot and humid, you're going to sweat more. You're going to use more glycogen, more carbohydrates. And now you need to compensate for that by drinking more and taking on additional carbohydrate. One of the biggest mistakes I saw a lot of runners make last year was not fueling enough. I've never seen the first aid stations so overwhelmed, and equally I've never seen so many runners passing out, collapsing, and I'm willing to bet that for a majority of those runners, it was probably the fact that they were severely dehydrated, where they just hadn't taken on enough fluids. It's really important to take into account the weather. Just to show you an example then, so this is the London Marathon route. Apologies, it's a little bit small on your screen, but you can find this map on the London Marathon website. So the London Marathon is one of the most well supplied events in terms of nutrition provision. So really from about 3 miles in, so just at the bottom, in the bottom right hand corner here, you've got the water stations that are available, and then they're pretty much available the whole way through the course, every sort of 3 miles or so. Same thing, once you get a bit further into the course, you then get things like Lucozade Sport in cups. It's not the entire bottle, it's only going to be a very small cups, very, very small amount, probably less than 200 millilitres. And then at some points you then get things like the Lucozade gel. So just to make it easier for you, I've put together a sort of simpler guide just to highlight this. So as you can see, water is pretty much provided every sort of 3 miles or so. So you're going to have plenty available. But again, having said that, it's only going to be in cups. At time of recording a few weeks ago, or over the past few weeks, I've run a few half marathons, and when I've then gone past the water station, these cups are less than half full. So whereas the cup probably holds just about 250 millilitres, I'd probably say some of these cups I was given had less than 100 millilitres. So all of a sudden, if you keep finding that or keep getting that over the event, you're going to become very, very dehydrated and really struggle to make it to the finish line there. Same thing with the carbohydrates, as you can see. In terms of things like Lucozade, Lucozade is provided at London Marathon. Again, it's not provided at every event. If you're doing Manchester, for example, it's High Five that will be providing the nutrition. But you can see that Lucozade Sport will be provided in cups, starting from sort of mile 9. And then at mile 13 and mile 19, there's then some Lucozade energy gels available there. Again, these are incredibly sweet. I would certainly recommend that you trial with them. If you haven't had them before you run the marathon, I would avoid these completely because they are incredibly sweet, and I know a lot of runners have struggled with them. Same thing here with the London Landmark. So this is in a few weeks' time. When you look at sort of the nutrition available for a half marathon, really here the only thing that's supplied is sort of water stations. So this is going to be about 3.5 miles in. About 3.5 miles into the event, a little bit further around sort of mile 10, mile 11. So again, potentially depending on your time, it's a long time to be running without enough fluid. And again, it could be very hot, very humid, and this could again impact your dehydration. And you do need to readjust your hydration strategy, maybe your fueling strategy to match here as well. The other thing as a top tip that I'd certainly encourage you to think about is what your start time is likely to be. For some of the smaller local events, most events are going to start around 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you're trying to aim for that fueling window about 2 or 3 hours before, realistically this is going to mean you eating and drinking about 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, something like that as a guide. However, one of the sort of big struggles I find a lot of runners find is then when their sort of start time changes and they haven't practiced with this. So some runners for London Marathon and some Manchester Marathon, the faster runners will be around the 9 o'clock mark, but some might not be running until 10:30, 11 o'clock, for example. So all of a sudden, you need to practice what does your fueling strategy look like when you're eating at say 8, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, rather than sort of what you're used to. If you train later on in the day, maybe you train sort of very early morning. I know it doesn't sound like very much, but it's these little things that can have such an impact in terms of how you feel. People might struggle to fuel at this time because they're not used to it. So it means they're going to now try and run 26 miles, try and run 13 miles with no fuel in the tank. And this is what a lot of runners then struggle with. So like I say, if you've got the time, this is where your nutrition is so important to take into account. So while you've got the time, the next few weeks, trial different drinking and hydration strategies, trial different gels, trial different products. So trial if you're going to use sweets, if you're going to use cereal bars, some of those other options I mentioned, trial and see what works for you. And then what's really important is you focus and stick to that strategy on the race itself. Just to show you what a strategy might look like then. So what's really important when it comes to your fueling is your timing. The timing of your fueling is so important. Once you start running, you don't need to take on any fuel straight away. I'd start from after about 30 minutes or so, taking on some form of carbohydrate. Again, depending on what you're aiming for in terms of your target time, in terms of your pace, in terms of that sort of carbohydrate target that you're aiming for. So if you're aiming for the sort of 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, that's essentially trying to get 3 of these SIS gels into your body every 20 minutes or so. So that's basically you start running at say 50 minutes, and then at sort of an hour and 10 minutes, you've got your second gel, hour and a half in, you're on your third gel, and so on here all the way through to the end of your race. Just to show you a slightly different example, so if you're someone that struggles with gels, or someone that suffers with what's often referred to as sort of flavour fatigue, where you start to struggle having the same thing over and over for hours on end, other options could be you might start the race with a banana. So you start off, you sort of bite off little chunks whilst you're running. Then a little bit later on, you might use the Lucozade Sport. So you sip on the Lucozade Sport, and whilst you're having that, you might then switch to things like cereal bars and other drinks just to sort of keep you going. Again, it's entirely up to you what works for you, but thinking about what does your fueling strategy look like, equally, how are you going to stay hydrated, is really key here. In terms of recovery, for me, if you've only got a few weeks left before your race, your recovery nutrition is probably the top tip I can give you in terms of the sooner you start the process, the sooner you're going to recover, the more you're going to get out of the training that you're currently doing. So whether that be using snacks, drinks, sweets, anything that gets that nutrition, those nutrients that I mentioned, back into your body is going to make a huge difference. Just to show you, I am a man of my words. This is a few years ago. I ran the London Landmarks half marathon, and after we finished at the course. We walked back and there was a Tesco, and my family were with me, and they said to me, "Do you want anything from the supermarket?" Thinking I might say sweets, or I might say, I don't know what they were thinking, but the first thing I said was, "Can I have a pint of milk?" I did get some very confused or strange looks from people as I walked down Oxford Street, drinking this bottle of milk, and then on the train back home. But again, it hits those R's of recovery that I mentioned. So for me, that's a no-brainer. A few common nutrition mistakes I see that runners make on race day as well. The first one, I'm sure you've heard this before, is trying something new on race day. Say it every single year, yet people will still do this, and it just ruins your race. And this could come from anything, whether it be your friend giving you a gel or product you haven't tried with. It could be the crowd, it could be the supporters. The list is endless, and this for me is still the thing that ruins your race day. A few years ago, when I ran the London Marathon for the first time, about 17 miles into the course, we were running along, me and 3 other random guys, never seen them before, and they, the supporters, some of them will be very helpful and they will offer like sweets and stuff. However, you will get some that will try and offer you pints of beer, they'll offer you pizza. And so about 17 miles in, there's Domino's Pizza by the side of the course. And as we ran past, these supporters were offering slices of pizza to the runners. So the 3 guys around me, they all took a slice. I didn't. And we got about half a mile further down the course, and the other 3 guys, 2 of them are throwing up at the side of the course, and the other one is then running off trying to find a sort of quiet place or private place to sort himself out. So top tip, please don't have pizza during the marathon or during your race. Again, instead, please stick to your nutrition strategy. If you haven't practiced with it, if you haven't tried it in your training, minimise that risk of ruining your race and just don't have it. As I say, spectators, they can be a fantastic source of support, but sometimes they can be a hindrance. If they are offering you foods and drinks you haven't practiced with, it can be an absolute disaster. So please do try and avoid them. In terms of on-course nutrition, so generally speaking, most races will really only have the water stations. Some events will have some additional carbohydrates. So let's say with the London Marathon, Lucozade will supply the products. Again, either invest in some before the race, trial with those gels and different products just to see how you get on, or best off, avoid it completely and just stick to the products that you've trained with. The second common mistake I see runners make is having too little carbohydrate during the race as well. So what I mean here is a lot of runners say to me they fuel by distance, or they have a instead of time. So the trouble with this is when they say, oh, I have a gel every 5k, 5 miles, for some of the more experienced runners, they're more likely to stick to that consistent pace. And when you actually look at how long it takes them to do 5k, they are hitting that recommended carbohydrate intake. However, as runners get further into the event, they start to get tired, fatigue starts to get in, so it takes them longer to complete that set distance. So as a result, they're now under fueling. So if they're having a gel every 5k or every 5 miles, and let's say 5 miles takes them 45 minutes, and if they're having one of those SIS gels that I mentioned, they're only having about 20, just about 30 grams of carbs per hour. So they're massively at the lower end, they're massively under fueling themselves, so it could be impacting their performance there. So a couple of tips to help here. One, stick to your fueling strategy. Think about what does it look like to hit those recommendations. 2, rather than fueling by distance, set a timer to remind you to eat and drink on a regular basis. So like I say, a good guideline in terms of gels is around 20 minutes or so if you're having those lower carb based gels. If you're having the higher gels around the 40 grams of carbs, it might mean that you only have one of those every 30 minutes. But again, you can adjust that timing to suit you. And as I say, you can set that timer on your watch, your phone, whatever you're using as you go around the course. The third common mistake, poor planning. Poor planning, maybe it's a bit harsh, or maybe a bit dramatic in terms of phrasing this one. But again, I still speak to runners every year. I go to the London Marathon Expo, and I've spoken to thousands of runners every year who, when you say, talk me through your nutrition strategy, and they just look at me completely blankly. They're about to run 26 miles maybe the next day, in a few days' time. And it's just that lack of plan or sort of poor planning prevents it is going to massively impact their performance. So if they can start to have an effective nutrition strategy in place, they're going to get so much more out of the race. This is what's going to help them hit that PB. So a couple of recommendations. When you start working out your fueling and how to carry it all, if you are using those SIS gels and you're going for, let's say, a 5.5 hour marathon, you are going to need to be having about 15 gels. There's no other way I can say it. So rather than trying to carry 15 gels with you, could you use your friends and family? So you might then plan your nutrition strategy to say to your family, right, if you're doing the London Marathon, let's say, I want you at miles 8 and 16. So you take what you need for the first 8 miles. At mile 8, you might grab some sweets for the sort of next leg, and then mile 16, you then grab some sports drinks. And again, so you don't have to carry everything with you, and you've got a bit of variety, a bit of choice. Obviously, the second one you could do is to invest in maybe a running belt or vest. Again, please do practice and trial this in your training. Please don't do what I saw lots of runners do, is buy a vest or buy a belt at the expo itself, run with it for the first time. They're not used to it, it rubs on their skin, and it causes terrible chafing and blisters. I have seen some real horror stories or some very horrible pictures over the years where people have done this. The third thing to take into account is what the weather is going to look like. So if it is really hot and humid, it's going to put the body under a lot more stress, a lot more strain to function. So that increase in temperature, you're going to be sweating more to cool yourself down. You are going to be using more carbohydrate, more glycogen. So it's really important that you readjust. So essentially, you're going to need to be drinking more. You're going to be needed to have maybe an extra energy gel or extra source of carbohydrate just to maintain your energy levels there too. So just to start to wrap this up then, so with a few tips. So for me, fueling, particularly at the moment with your last few runs or last few weeks of running, you're at the point where yes, your sort of training is maybe starting to reduce slightly in the build up and you're starting to taper. However, making sure you are fueling every single run, it is going to be key. As I mentioned, your recovery. This is, again, one of the best tips I can recommend to you. This is what's going to help keep you fresh or get you to the start line in as fresh a state as possible. In terms of supplements, I haven't really talked about supplements in this webinar, but when it comes to supplements, there are hundreds of supplements out there on the market, new supplements added every single day. I see at the moment on sort of Facebook and social media, loads of people posting about all these supplement recommendations, but I'd probably say a majority of them don't actually work. They have very little science or very little evidence to back up their claims. There's hundreds of supplements on the market, like I say, yet probably less than 10 actually have any good, strong scientific evidence to back up their claims and their use. So if you do have any questions on supplements, please do feel free to reach out, and I'll share my contact details in a moment. Tip 4, if you are looking for sort of nutrition advice, please do reach out to someone who is registered, who is suitably qualified. Again, on social media, there is a huge amount of misinformation, dangerous information, misinformed information. Again, I see it. This is part of the reason why I created Fuel the Runner, is to provide runners with evidence-based nutrition information and support. The amount of information I see posted in sort of various places, as I say, it's not correct at all, and it's more maybe anecdotal information rather than evidence-based strategies and support. So again, if you are looking for further help with your nutrition, please do reach out. And that leads me quite nicely onto the final part. So I hope you have found this video, this webinar, very helpful. Just to finish off, if you are looking to take your running performance to the next level, we at Fuel the Runner, I currently run a 30-day nutrition challenge. You can start this whenever you like, but it's basically for runners of all levels and abilities who want to feel stronger in their runs. They want to run faster, for longer, at higher intensity. They want to learn how to improve and enhance their recovery. They want to avoid hitting the wall during their runs, so again, they're getting more out of their training. And they want to build sort of better nutrition habits and better nutrition strategies to support not just their running performance, but their health and well-being too. In terms of what's actually included, it includes 30 days of structured nutrition content, support and coaching from myself. So each day you'll get access to a new module with a nutrition tip or some content to support your running that you can then apply. You get access to a community of committed runners who are also looking to enhance their running performance, and we can support each other as we go. Each week I host a live Q&A, so it's an opportunity to jump on a call, ask any questions, share your wins, your challenges with myself and like-minded runners as well. And equally along the way you get access to lots of additional resources, fueling guides, recipes and other additional support to further enhance your running performance. In terms of the cost, all of this costs less than one energy gel per day. So all of this 30-day challenge is essentially £1 per day. An energy gel currently retails for about £1.65 in most supermarkets. So 30 energy gels is going to cost you £49, whereas 30 days of structured nutrition content, coaching and support from me is going to help level up your running performance for essentially £30 for 30 days. So for me, certainly a worthwhile investment. If you're interested in joining, you can pause this video, scan this QR code, and that will take you to the website where you can find out more about the challenge, and you can join the team and join myself and further enhance your running performance, like I say. If you're on Instagram and Facebook, and maybe you've come across this video on YouTube, for example, just to let you know, I do have a Fuel the Runner Instagram and Facebook page, so just at Fuel the Runner on Instagram, or if you search on Facebook, Fuel the Runner, Nutrition Tips and Advice, you can join the community, again, share your wins, share your run success, ask questions, and you get access to all the sort of top tips and resources that I then share on the respective pages as well. So that's everything from me for this webinar. Hope you have found it helpful and beneficial. If you are looking for further help and support, if you've got any questions around nutrition and your running performance, check out all the details below this video where you can get access to further support.